Our first guest tonight, outraged over the FBI's stunning double standard, the special counsel targeting Cohen, while Hillary Clinton's blatant violations of campaign finance laws are ignored altogether by both the FBI and the Justice Department. He also says contempt proceedings need to occur now in the wake of the DOJ and FBI's failure to comply with Congress's constitutional right to oversight. Joining us tonight, Congressman Ron DeSantis, member of several key committees. They include Oversight and Government Reform, Foreign Affairs, and Judiciary. He is also the leading Republican candidate to be governor of the great state of Florida. Great to have you with us, Congressman. Let's start with, first of all, Grassley. He's been sitting in Washington in the Senate approaching 4 decades, and he has confidence in Mueller. Are you kidding me? What in the world is this man thinking?
Lou, I think about how they handled, say, Cheryl Mills, who was Hillary Clinton's attorney. They had her sitting in, on the interview. They weren't raiding Cheryl Mills's office, even though Cheryl Mills, there were some issues with Cheryl Mills. And in this instance, to go to this extreme length for what's the underlying offense? They say a campaign finance violation? Well, what about the Clinton campaign? They did millions and millions of dollars to the Perkins Coie law firm, who then paid Fusion GPS, so that when they filed their FEC compliance reports, there was no trace of Fusion GPS or the dossier or any of that. So they camouflaged those payments. You're not supposed to do that. Has Fusion GPS been raided? Has Perkins Coie been raided? And so the double standard here is really, really troubling, Lou, and it just seems that ever since this special counsel was appointed, it was try to figure out whatever we can find anyway and just throw it against the wall and hope it sticks. That's not the way you want law enforcement to go.
Well, law enforcement, I don't even know if there is such a thing left within the FBI or the Department of Justice. The special counsel investigation is a political persecution. It's no longer an investigation. This is a joke. The people leading it are a joke. We're talking about 13 of 17 attorneys who are Democrats, and I'm talking about ideologically left-wing Democrats. These are not just passing a Kiwanis lunch, and these folks are committed. And this tells us all we need to know. Why isn't there some standard, either by the Department of Justice or at least by the leadership of the House and the Congress, as to who can be involved in this investigation? There's just no question anymore. This is corruption at its worst.
Well, we've raised that in the Congress. A handful of us has, not the whole leadership, but you look at somebody like an Andrew Weissman. Not only is he a big Democrat, not only does he have a checkered reputation, but he was actually at Hillary Clinton's election party in 2016. He's reported to have made derogatory comments about President Trump before the special counsel investigation started. And so why would you put somebody like him on this? Because when you're doing these things, the American public needs to have confidence in it. And here's the problem with all of this, Lou. At this point, you have half the country, the people that voted for Donald Trump, they're not going to have confidence in any type of negative outcome in this thing. That confidence is shot. And so I just think that this is doing a lot of damage to the country at this point.
It's doing a lot of damage to the country. It could be, that damage, though, could be very specific and much broader based than half the country. We are dealing in we have a president who is contending with so many perils from so many directions in foreign policy. It's extraordinary that frankly, Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell are nothing more than the stooges of K Street, the Chamber of Commerce, the Business Roundtable, and the establishment of this country. And they are behaving abominably.
Well, what we're trying to do now this week, I mean, you mentioned it in your lead-in, there are all these documents we've asked for a long time, including just a 2-page document that kicked off the so-called collusion investigation. Nunes has been asking for that for months and months. And so here's the thing. Either they turn it over or we immediately have to move to hold these people in contempt. Lou, we can't just keep playing this game back and forth, run out the clock. The American people are entitled to this. We're entitled to this in the Congress. And if we're not willing to put our institutional muscle behind those requests, then we're going to continue to be treated like a lackluster institution that too often we are.
Tomorrow is that deadline, April 11th, that was extended by both committees. I mean, what are the odds that that deadline will be met, and what are the odds that you can muster enough courage, enough principle, enough integrity, and enough fire in the House of Representatives to actually move forward and hold officials of the corrupt Justice Department and FBI in contempt?
So I'm not holding my breath that the deadline will be met, and I don't think anyone should be holding their breath for that. And so I think it will be time to pull the trigger on contempt for these officials, because they've stonewalled months and months and months. And think about the difference in behavior in terms of them responding when we're investigating their conduct in terms of the dossier and all that, how slow they are. But then look how quick they are to go raid Michael Cohen's office when it suits them, or how quick they are. They're probing this donation to Trump's charity from this Ukrainian businessman. It was like $150,000. He gave millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation. They're not raiding the foundation. They're not probing that. So now's the time to act, and we can't have them living under different rules than they're applying to the rest of the country.
Yeah, it seems to me, Congressman, that I have to tell you, we're listening to Mitch McConnell talk about the special counsel as if he wanted to have both arms around him, not just one, instead of stand with the president and demand a higher level of conduct of the special counsel. We don't even hear from Speaker Ryan. All of this can be shut down by the House of Representatives, could it not, if it's just simply said no more money will be appropriated for the special counsel? Why isn't there a level of integrity, a level of just outrage about the conduct of the Justice Department and the leadership of the Republican Party?
There was an effort, I think, for members, and I've actually tried to do it too, to sunset the special counsel, put up or shut up. But with this omnibus bill, Lou, they packed it in and they rammed it through in like 12 hours. So there was no amendments, no opportunity for any rank and file member to participate. And so that was a deliberate choice to green light the funding for this thing going forward, at least till the end of the fiscal year. And I think that's a mistake. We could put constraints on it. If Rosenstein's not willing to do that, we could do it with the power of the purse.
Could have done it.
Should have done it.
Amen.